Welcome back, everyone, to Season 2 of IGNITX Conversations after a little hiatus. My name is Shen Ming, and together with Ilva, Gustavo, and Neo, my co-founders of IGNITX, who are with us today, we would like to welcome you to this session. For those of you who are new to IGNITX, allow me to provide a very brief introduction. IGNITX is a family of international events experts and enthusiasts with a passion and a desire to make a very positive difference in the world. We provide specialized consultancy and operational services in combination with active and integrated support of project delivery. We are strong advocates and believers of education, of open dialogue, and of taking action to contribute to positive change. We have launched multiple initiatives, including this IGNITX Conversation series, the What Is series, and more. IGNITX Conversations was conceived from our intentions to reach out and to bolster our community during the initial uncertainties and the upheavals of our current times and its challenges. With this time on our hands, the opportunities seem much too good for us to pass up. The opportunities for dialogue and for discovering together the possibilities for positive change that we could move towards, for enhancing our processes, challenging inefficient methodologies, identifying and breaking down old biases and assumptions, all the while tapping into the minds and also the hearts of leaders and innovators, friends, colleagues, and family in the Olympic, the Paralympic, and the events world. Last season's main themes addressed the challenges that we face: resilience, opportunities for growth, and opportunities for facing changes. This was framed in the context of COVID-19 pandemic and was meant as a reminder to many of our audience who were struggling with the uncertainty that we are in fact not helpless, that while recognizing and accepting this difficult reality that we face, we could foster hope as the foundation for moving forward. For this season, we continue to address the themes of accessibility, inspiration, and empowerment. As always, we hope that these sharings will contribute to the pooling of knowledge, ideas, and best practices that we can all learn from. In the first episode of this season, we had the honor of hosting Ileana Rodriguez, who is a Paralympian consultant of the IPC and US OPC, architect and accessibility specialist, who shared with us that accessibility extends beyond the question of physical access, including the way we treat people with disability and how we provide services for those who have disability. It is a consideration for all persons of all abilities and is very much about enabling all members of our community, of inclusion. At its heart, accessibility and inclusion are interconnected. She challenged us to include accessibility from the beginning in all events of all sizes and types, through our programs, planning, and budgeting, as well as through education and empowerment of our teams and those around us. The long-term benefits of this are vast, leaving a powerful legacy, not only physically, but through the creation of a culture of inclusion, of celebration, and of dignifying each other as humans. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Teoh Chin Sim, Singapore's first female sports and exercise medicine specialist, who is presently Senior Consultant and Clinical Director for the Sports and Exercise Medicine Center at Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. For over 25 years, Dr. Teoh has been the attending team physician to Singapore's elite athletes at major games, including the ASEAN School Games, the SEA Games, the ASEAN Para Games, Commonwealth Games, the Asian Games, the Youth Olympic, and also the Paralympic Games. Dr. Teoh was honored for her services to our nation with the Public Service Medal at the National Day Awards in 2019 and honored again in 2020 with the Healthcare Humanity Awards for her efforts in founding and leading Play Buddy, an inclusive sports play group for children with varying physical abilities. In the international arena, Dr. Teoh was former secretary of the medical committee of the International Hockey Federation and has officiated as one of their medical officers for the prestigious 1999 Champions Trophy and pre-Olympic qualifiers for Sydney 2000. She has contributed significantly as a member of the Anti-Doping Committee of the International Paralympic Committee and the TUE expert group of the World Anti-Doping Agency, working behind the scenes at Rio 2016 summer and then the Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Paralympic Games. But really, enough from me. Please let us welcome Dr. Teoh.
Hi, Wayne.
Hello.
Hi from Singapore. Hi,
Lovely.
everybody. Yeah, hi, everybody from Singapore. I think we've got friends from different places, but we have a few Singaporeans that I can recognize some of the names. Yeah, and I just want to thank Ignite very much, Lino and Lino and Chen Ming and their business partners. Yeah, for inviting me to share. It is a great honor and privilege to be here because I really I work in a little small community hospital, and I oversee a sports medicine center with a team of people, a multidisciplinary center.
Thank you, Dr. Teoh. We're really honored to have you with us. After all, community is the foundation of the stability and the growth and the progress of all of our societies. So thank you very much. Friends in the audience, if you wish to pose any questions to Dr. Teoh, do feel free to type them into the chat and we will endeavor to address them at the end of the session. So without further ado, let us begin. So Dr. Teoh, can you please share with us how and why you first became interested in and then involved in the parasports and the Paralympic movement?
Okay. All right. You know, I'm a medical doctor, and for many years, for several games, I had been working mostly and going to mostly what you would call able-bodied games, or non-para games. Many times as a team physician and sometimes as the chief medical officer. And occasionally I would see a few of our para athletes in our clinic. However, my life and my whole mindset got transformed, when I went to the London 2012 games. We had a small team. We had like 7 of our own athletes. But when we went to the London Para Games, and I'd never been to a Para Games before, it just opened my my mind. I opened my eyes. I opened my heart, and what happened to me was actually, I just like to share 2 instances. I spent any time that I wasn't needed by the athletes to serve them. I spent whatever free time I could. I would go to the swimming pool and I would watch swimmers training and competing whenever I could. And in their swimming trunks and swimming costume, and their physical impairment is of course very obvious to me. And I thought, wow, they were swimming like in ways that I had never seen. I could never imagine. And what really captivated my heart was, when we watch non-para games, we are always looking at who touches the wall first, who touches the wall second. But not all of us see who is 6th, 7th, 8th place, right? But the para games in London, I saw the athlete. We clap for the people who come in one by one, first, second, third. But when the last person swam and last person finished and touched the wall, especially in one particular race, when the person was about 1 lap behind, and when the person touched the wall, everybody stood up and gave a standing ovation.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, we will rarely see it, rarely see it in another event, that is what we call non-para games. And that was the first thing. And the second thing was something happened in the dining hall one day, because when we have a games like Paralympic games, we have maybe 4,000 athletes who have various kinds of impairments, competing at very high level. But in the dining hall, one day I was seated next to 2 athletes who had no arms, right? They had 2 legs, normal legs, but they had no arms. And both of them were seated in their chair, not doing sport. They were eating their meal. They were sitting across each other, facing one another. They had their plate and a piece of steak each. And they were using their big toe and their second toe to grasp the fork and the knife to cut their piece of steak with their toes in right and left foot, and then cutting it and feeding themselves, right? Bringing the food from the plate to their mouth. That was the first thing. I was watching that with no assistance. And after that, they were from a country where they may not have had any straws, where they lived in the mountainside, yeah, or wherever they were in the village. And they probably didn't have cups with handles either, because they might not be able to hold it anyway with their toes, right? You imagine trying to hold a cup with your foot, right? And feeding yourself and lifting it to your mouth. So they drank a cup like this. You can see this. So I would normally drink my drink like this, right? They put this on the edge of a table like that, and they tilted the cup across. Just the timing is such that it goes just down like that, so that the water would leak into their mouth and then right it up again. And I thought that was just amazing. No straw. They just use their lips to grasp like that and tilt it just across like that and up again. I thought that was amazing. And I thought, wow, they can do so many things that I cannot imagine. And I thought, and for a moment, and then I looked around. After that, I looked up, and the only person who had 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 hands with 10 fingers, and 2 legs was me. Everybody else, when I looked up, they were visually impaired, they were physically impaired in some way. They were in wheelchair, they were in frame. And I thought, wow, who's normal down here, I think I'm the one who is impaired. I'm the one who's impaired, and they are all non-impaired. Because I'm the minority, you see. So I'm the minority, so I'm the one that sticks out, and they are all the majority, which they are normal, and I'm the one who's what you call abnormal or disabled or impaired, And for that moment, I thought, wow, actually it doesn't really matter. People are just what they are. That's all. Yeah, they're just what they are. And that just changed my whole, so that just changed my whole life until today. So I've become a para-sport fanatic and a para-athlete fanatic and a para-games fanatic. Fan and fanatic.
That's a powerful message, because interestingly, what you have just said and what Ileana said was see people.
Yes.
Instead of people who are somehow categorized into one section or another.
Yep.
Just people.
Yep.
That's a really powerful message. Actually, on a point of language, because you just used the word impairment, and you use also the word disability. And so many people use these words very interchangeably. And I think we also discussed previously about how, for example, if I were to use in a sentence, if we look at it in the social sense, if I use both words in a sentence, someone who has an impairment may not necessarily also have a disability. So just curious, especially from a medical point of view, can you share with us the difference between these two words, impairment versus disability?
Okay. So let's say impairment is a loss of a function or a structure, right? Yeah. So for example, let's say just pick eyesight, right? Yeah. So you and I can see, right? We have 2 eyes, but you see, if without glasses, I have some impairment, because I have astigmatism and have long or short-sightedness. So that I don't feel so impaired, I put on my glasses. Because I'm impaired by my long-sightedness or my astigmatism, right? Yeah. Now, if I were blind, I had glaucoma, or maybe I lost my eye to cancer. I had my eye taken off. Then I would have an impairment. I would have a visual impairment. Now, the extent to which this impairment now disables me, because disability is like a big term, it's an umbrella term that covers impairment, activity, limitation, or participation restriction. So it's kind of a composite. So I have a health condition or an impairment, right? And then I have my personal factors. That means my characteristic, my psychological status, my age, my gender, my education, my occupation, my motivation, And then after that, I have the environmental factors, right? So social factors, my home environment, yeah, my equipment. So all that, so health condition, and then my personal factors, and my environment and social environment, and all that together uh, affects how I see how my impairment may disable me. So, for
Mhm.
example, if I talk about a friend of mine, he was a tandem cyclist at the Atlanta 1996 Olympic Games. Now, he has a genetic disorder where he's completely blind. All right. And so is his and he has family members who are also. So he was completely blind. But you see, he doesn't feel so disabled, because for him, what he's done is because of his use of his guide dog, his blind guide dog, and he's enabled by digital technology, he can plan Changi Airport. When he gets to Changi Airport, he can plan with all this support, yeah, the external
Mhm.
factors, and his strong sense of motivation and independence, yeah, and
Mhm.
education, right, and accessibility to all this. Even though he's completely blind, he can plan his route from Changi Airport to a mall in San Francisco, and he knows where the toilet is on the second floor. So he doesn't feel very disabled when he goes to San Francisco because he knows and he doesn't need to ask anybody how to go to that toilet. He can get off the train, land in San Francisco, make his way to the bus, the train, and whichever way, go to the mall, go up the escalator, and go to that toilet on the second floor because of there are beacons in the mall, and he knows using his digital platform he can maneuver himself all the way without asking anybody anything. Yeah, so he doesn't feel disabled, whereas another person who is blind like him can feel very disabled because they have no they maybe they are born in a situation or a circumstance where they don't have access to all this. They are poor, they are uneducated, they have no family support, whatever that support system is, and they may be begging, they may be asking for alms on the street. They are very disabled, right? Yeah, so does that explain?
Yes.
Same
So,
impairment, but one feels very enabled and the other one feels quite disabled.
right. So having a medical impairment doesn't necessarily determine our ability, whether we are enabled or disabled. And
Yeah,
disability is a much more complex,
I guess it's
uh,
complex, it's multifactorial.
right.
Yeah.
So it's not only about accessibility in terms of infrastructure, but it's, as you said, societal, it's cultural, it's so many more factors
Yeah,
than that.
personal motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you very much. That really, I think, clarifies it a lot more, and also reveals that there is much more to it than just what we always see. And we mentioned this on our last episode as well. You see a symbol and it's a wheelchair, and that's not representative at all about the different abilities of different people and the different impairments different people have as well. So thank you for that. Um, I guess to also touch on, because you've now mentioned about different games as well. In games planning, we are not often as keyed in as we can be. So in our different functional areas within the organizing committee, we're not so keyed into the different medical aspects of an athlete's journey, because we often just go, okay, well, we have our medical colleagues for this. So we rely on them, of course,
Right.
for their advice and for their experience in these areas. So on the one side, we are planning the logistics, whether or not it's, okay, let's do the paperwork with them, or this is the paperwork that they need so that they can practice at the games, or so they can bring in medical equipment. But I wonder, can you share with us about the journey, or perhaps a day in a life of an athlete, and maybe that support team as well at the games? Because I believe that this will also give us, not only with these insights, it will also enable us to plan better and to organize better events, and in general be more inclusive.
Oh, one of the things I learned about, and I learned many things at the London Paralympic Games. Yeah, it was a real learning journey for me. Yeah, I mean, I learned much from the athlete. Yeah, it's one thing to see them in the clinic, and it's quite one thing to travel with them. It's just because you can't quite learn it in a book. People can tell you, but then there's another thing where you learn it by experience, right? Yeah, they can just tell you this. And so maybe I just share with you a day in the life of one of the athletes I accompanied. Now, this particular athlete is a completely you would say completely dependent. Yeah, almost completely dependent on another person for everything. Yeah. So he's on a wheelchair, cannot control the neck muscles nor the trunk because has a kind of dystrophy. Yeah, so where the muscles are all flaccid, and the person can only lift up the handphone at waist level to pan up and hold the fork and spoon to feed themselves. But that's about all. So if our athlete had an itchy nose, which she can feel, she would have to ask you to scratch it for her. All right, scratch her nose, comb her hair, shower, turn every 2 hours in the bed, right? Yeah, so it's completely needs assistance. And so on one day, I sat down and asked her team and herself to explain what they did every day. Yeah, because I kind of saw them at breakfast, but I didn't know how early they started. Right, I saw them at breakfast at around maybe 7:15. I say, oh, what time did you get up today? He say, oh, we got up at 4 o'clock. Where do you have to be? Where do you have to be at the competition hall? Oh, we have to be there at 9. I said, but you get up at 4 because I only needed to get up at 6:45 to be at breakfast at 7:15, right? Yeah, they had to get up at 4. And I said, what did you do? I said, oh, well, first we have to wake the athlete up. When we wake up, then we wake the athlete up. And then the athlete, because she's completely dependent on us, we have to shower, comb hair, feed her, clothe her, wear her shoes and socks, and make her presentable. And then we have to do it for ourselves. And then after that all takes like 2 hours. It takes 2 hours to do all that. And then after that, we have to get ready. We have to get ready all the things. We have to pack everything. And so by the time we get ready and come out, it's like about 6:30 to 6:45. And then we come down here to the dining hall, and then we have to help her take her food. And then we have to take our own food. And then we have to feed our athlete as well. And then we feed ourselves along the way. And then we have to, and then, so that whole process takes like around already 3 hours, right? 3.25 hours. And after that, we have to plan to go to wherever your bus bay is or your transportation mall. And that's another distance from the dining hall with whatever equipment they have to carry. Some is already at the training hall, but some needs to be carried there. And then that whole journey takes another half an hour. And then the bus ride to the venue where the venue is, and that's another journey. And then from there, they have to also get themselves to the training hall or the competition hall. So that whole hop takes 5 hours from the waking time to the reporting time, So, and every day they did this. And, what I appreciated was our athlete who is dependent, therefore needs a caregiver. And for this particular athlete, because we were a small team, we didn't have, our head count was limited. So the coach and the coach and the assistant were also the caregiver. So they were double and triple hatting.
Wow.
So they were very exhausted, Shenming. They were so exhausted. And they did this for many days. And so when I understood this, one of the days when I wasn't needing to serve too many people, I looked at them and I asked the coach and the other assistant, I said, would you like some time off? Dr. Teoh, you mean you don't mind? I said, of course I don't. They had been getting up. They slept very little, because they were also planning the training and all that, because they were double hatting and triple hatting and doing caregiving as well. So they took, it's just 4 hours. Can you take care of her for 4 hours? I said, of course I can. They were so appreciative, and really what happened to me was I grew in such respect and admiration for all of them. Yeah, for the athlete and the coach and the assistant who are making so many adjustments to their own schedule. to accommodate all these tasks, yeah, basically so that the athlete can perform at their best, because we want them to be optimized, yeah, because they're going there and they're just going to compete for those 2 or 3 days and that's it, you know. Or sometimes even some sport is just for that, I wouldn't know, 1 minute and that's all, you know. You have they just have that 1 minute right, and they have to
Right.
perform at their best. Yeah, so I really grew in my respect and admiration for them. Yeah.
My goodness. Thank you for sharing this. Working with NIC Relations and some of my colleagues also together with NPC Relations, our main client group is the athletes, but we don't actually, I can't speak for my colleagues, but I can
No.
only speak for myself. I'm embarrassed to say that I actually don't know that much about the athletes and the team officials' very different journeys. And of course, I think you mentioned as well that this is only one athlete amongst the many, and
Many
every
athletes who
athlete,
have caregivers, yeah. Yeah.
right, and every athlete has different needs, and this spectrum of needs makes it so complex. I'm thinking right now about the resources, or the maybe in certain games where you're limited by the number of accreditations that you're entitled to as a team, and how does a team assign the resources in consideration of all these factors? It's mind-blowing. So wow,
Yeah,
thank
so
you
we
for
don't have
sharing
this
this.
issue when it's a non-para games, you see, because you don't
Mhm.
have as much caregiving, you know. There is no caregiving, there's no chaperone. The athletes are basically independent. But this is a situation.
Mm.
So when we are a small team, our accreditation cards are very precious, yeah, because it's really very little, few, because it's depending on your contingent size. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, adding to that, what would you say, as a physician, what are your biggest challenges when you attend to the team at the Paralympic Games or Parasport Games? And of course, as a doctor, you're not only caring for athletes. As a team physician, you're not only caring for the health of your athletes. Would that be correct to say that?
Yeah, because in the games that I've been, you know, athletes may be about 2/3 and
Mm.
officials 1/3 of the contingent. So if you have like 1,000 in your contingent, athletes may be 600, 650, and the officials judge. I know officials meaning coaches and team managers, sports scientists, and medical personnel themselves. All that may be amounting to 300, 300, 350. So it's really a big team. Yeah, then if the para games, you'll have also the caregivers themselves or chaperones, yeah, and also guides, because some of our athletes have guides. Like say the visually impaired have guides to go with them for example, running, they have a guide, yeah, they are paired, yeah, and so we take care. And as a precursor, perhaps I mean, challenges come when you are maybe not well prepared. Okay, put it that way. Yeah. So we try to prepare as best as we know with the knowledge that we have ahead of time. Yeah. So when we are going to a games, usually there's all the chef de mission briefings as well as briefings, and accompanying that will be the medical briefings, right? And so we get as much information as possible for the medical setup in ahead of time, so that we don't. So we take care of we know what to expect, and then after that, when there's unexpected, we're in a better place. Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's a precursor. Um, and at para games, our athletes generally tend to be as a group. Para athletes, on the average age, tends to be older. Yeah, yeah, they tend to be older. They also tend to have more what we call comorbidities or illnesses. You know, they may have various illnesses accompanying their impairment, right? Yeah, and so we need to be well prepared with their medical files, make sure that their pre-existing medical or surgical conditions, whatever they are well treated and handled in a stable condition, and that they are fit to go to the games. They are optimized in their health, right? Yeah, because we don't want something to blow up at the games when they're supposed to be performing, right? Yeah, so we want to deal with them ahead of time. Otherwise, they will present themselves as challenges if they are not well treated, and then they go into a games kind of suboptimal, and then under those stressful situations, and sometimes not in their and often not in their country. Yeah, competing at for example, Paralympic games, not in their country, not familiar medical, all new, right? And so they have to start dealing with things, we have to start dealing with things there. right? The other thing is sometimes depending on the level of the games. I think Paralympic Games itself, they have various specifications, and I think there are standards that they need to upkeep. Depending on whether it's a games that you go, which is a single sport game or a multi-sport game, and depending on which country it's held in, and whether it's a regional game or a local games, challenges can present themselves there and then, because they can promise it, some things can be promised to you, and then when you get there, oh, it's not as it's said. And that therein lies a challenge. So for example, like logistics, right? So there was a particular regional games that I went to, and on paper it looked nice, but when we arrived there, oh, okay, the buses that we were using didn't have ramps. Yeah, didn't quite have ramps. Yeah, but they had a lot of manpower. So what happened was, we had very strong young men lifting wheelchairs with the athletes up onto vehicles to transport, right? Because they had a lot of labor. So they were strong men and they lifted chairs and athletes up. You know, it was amazing. They just didn't have ramps, but they were enabling anyway, right? By the sheer manpower, right? And then the other thing about logistics, for example, we found that there was a particular instance I remember. We were going out on an outing because it was like our free day, and our hosts were very kind and they took us to do some sightseeing. And however, because the buses that we were transported in weren't quite retrofitted, like when we go to the Paralympic Games, you retrofit your buses so that the wheelchairs can go in, and you may be able to accommodate, say, 4 wheelchairs, right? For example, yeah. So the buses that we went on, they weren't retrofitted in that manner, because some of our countries that we go to, they are third world countries, right? And it's very expensive to do this. It's lucky that you even get a bus, for example. Yeah. So we had one of our athletes who had no control, who would not have normal control of the neck. So he has a high headrest so that it's all sitting nicely. Because if the head comes out of the headrest, look, the head will drop like that because there's no control. Just like a little baby, if you're a newborn, she cannot control the neck well. So this is one of our athletes. So the bus swerved, and because the chair was not locked in any particular position, the head dislodged from the headrest and fell down like that. And because people weren't exactly observing, so we learned it backwards. Because of the position, and it was so noisy, people couldn't hear our athlete. Suddenly somebody looked, they said, "Hey, her head." So I mean, nothing bad happened, but things like that. And I said, "Oh gosh." I said, "You better hold the head." Yeah. So we held the head for the rest of the trip. So we learned some things we learned backwards. Yeah, we shouldn't take anything for granted. But that was one of the situations. Yeah, nothing untoward happened. Actually, we all had a laugh about that. So I think our para athletes, I find that they have very good sense of humor. They have a great sense of humor. So the athlete laughed, and so did the whole bus. Are you okay? Are you okay?
Oh, wow.
Everything was all right. And after that, for every bus ride, we make sure the head was held.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess challenges so of course, as you said, preparation is key.
Yeah, preparation is key, yeah.
And I think maybe it's not an exaggeration to say prevention is the best medicine for really
yes, of course, yeah.
most things. Yeah.
So the challenges I think logistics is one of them. Yeah. And then medical care. Sometimes, we say when you go on the ground, then you really need to find out when you arrive there, whatever is promised or said. If you didn't have an opportunity, if you have an opportunity to, sometimes in the major games, we recce, we go for a site visit. That means we do a pre-planned trip and get to know everything. Sometimes sometimes we are unable to because even the facilities are not ready. Then when we get there, we have to do a site visit again to make sure everything is as it is, or maybe we need to find out new things. Yeah. So that we can prepare ahead of time.
So with these gaps sometimes in understanding, so then the challenges just arise, and it sounds like you have to be constantly vigilant as well in this work. That's amazing.
Yes.
Wow. Hey, I guess on that point, actually, maybe if we could dig in a little bit more. Based on your
Right.
experience, what would you say could be areas of potential improvement that we can achieve at an event or during games, either through the understanding of the medical concerns of an athlete and their entourage during the games? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, as a doctor, what would you like members of an organizing committee to keep in mind, or related organizations? So since many organizations deal with para-athletes or para-sports or people with different abilities, what as a doctor, would you like us to keep in mind or to remember or to be to actively go and learn about, so that we can understand and that we can support?
Well, okay, I guess for this one, logistics is one of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just talk a whole lot about logistics. Yeah, logistics
Right.
to appreciate that, and that assistance. I think logistics is a really big part. One of the things I learned also with our athletes is that because of some of their impairments, they are not able to, for example, carry luggage on their own, and
Mm-hmm.
so during check-in and check-out, um, actually we would need some help in terms of transportation, because we not only have to pack for ourselves, we assist to pack and lift and carry their stuff as well at the airport, from the checkout from the airport down onto to the bus, and then after that, when we land at the village, and there we have assistance. But at the airport, there's lots of luggage coming off, and our athletes, basically we have to take care of this all ourselves, and it actually lengthens the time that we spend. So I think logistics is one of those things, right? And then our concern as a doctor is always access, yeah, to good medical care, because we don't want to worry about our athlete, that our medical setup there helps us to take care of any acute problems that arise, that there's adequate specialists to assist us when we need to, yeah, because of our athletes who have various sometimes comorbidities. And then accommodation, yeah. I think I've been to games where the accommodation is very well planned, yeah, where for example, the doors, the doors to the rooms and the doors to the toilets are wide enough for our wheelchairs and various things to go through. Sometimes they are not, right? And we have to, on the ground, start maybe removing the frame, or sometimes even removing the door. We've ever removed the door because with the door, with the bathroom door in the hotel room, the bathroom door is that narrow. And if you open the door into the toilet, for example, and you try to get a wheelchair in there, we can't move anything. So basically, we've had the hotel people remove the doors off their hinges so that the athlete has more space to maneuver in the toilet, for a toilet that is a regular toilet and not a toilet that is what you call friendly to the wheelchair, yeah, or ramp, no, wheelchair or frame. Yeah, so it's such a
Right.
simple thing like that in accommodation. Yeah, and then the room size also, yeah, because we've got all these things that we need to wheel in and out. Yeah, so it's really, if it's narrow, it's difficult to maneuver, it's difficult for them to get in. Yeah, and then the safety, because they need to store their stuff. So if the room is too small, and then if you leave it in the corridor, of course you're afraid it might get stolen, right? And then you have to have a proper storage place. So I think these are basically logistical and accommodation, but it affects them, you see. And it affects them, it affects their psyche. They're not at peace, they can't perform, right? Yeah. Although it's not directly medical, but it's still their care. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think,
Yeah.
as you mentioned before as well, it's a very holistic view
Yeah.
of things that we need to take. That makes me think, just listening to what you're saying, it makes me think about how we on the organizing committee side really need to test and test even more, and that we actually need to have the appropriate people testing. It's not just someone who, not just one of us random persons from the organizing committee walking around testing the systems when we are not actually able to fully load a system with the different needs of the different athletes.
Can I ask you? Could I ask you a question, Ming?
Yes.
Yeah. So therefore, when you're planning, for example, accommodation or logistics, In your team, you would have people who have who themselves are maybe previously para athletes or themselves familiar, so that they can scout or recce with you. Do you
Right.
typically have
So
that in a para game
for
in the
the
planning?
Paralympic Games, right, in the organizing committee, we would have the Paralympic Games integration team,
Okay.
and they exist in some form or another. Because of course every organizing committee is different, and
Yes.
so I know that in one of the most recent games I was in our within our relations team,
Yes.
while we had some people with different knowledge on this,
Yes.
we could have done with additional expertise. I think we could have done with much more intent. So looking back, because of course hindsight is
Yes.
always
Okay.
perfect vision.
Yes. Yes.
But I think we could have had even more intentional interactions with our team members in Paralympic integration to fully understand the things that we needed to sort of stand behind, or not fight for, but to push for, or to bring awareness to, or to educate on. And I think we ourselves, I'm embarrassed to say that we ourselves in our team could have done with more education on this as well, so we could really see what areas we could have supported the athletes and team officials more on. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of still about the games, you work with
Okay.
the Anti-Doping Commission of the IPC. What are some important? So, of course, having worked with different games, is there any particular learnings from working with the Anti-Doping Commission of the IPC that you would like to highlight, or that you think would be interesting to highlight and share about?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I got an education from one of our members. The best education I got was from one of our anti-doping committee members. Yeah. Um, and this was at a briefing that she did, an educational briefing for doping control officers. Yeah. I mean, those of us who are involved in sports, the anti-doping in sport movement is very strong, led by WADA, right? And every country has its own is encouraged to have its own anti-doping organization. So at International Paralympic Games, we have an anti-doping committee, and so we work closely with the organizing committee and the doping control committee in that country to organize doping control, because we want a fair sport, fair sport and a safe sport. So one of our committee members at that then, she was a Paralympian herself and a world champion from Poland, right, in cross-country skiing and biathlon. So at the beginning of doping control officer training for the games, she has a briefing. She actually educates us on etiquette, the etiquette toward para athletes, right? Yeah, because I would say almost all or most of our doping control officers are what you would call non-para background. They have no impairment. Okay, all right, yeah. Their impairment is maybe sometimes their language, because they don't speak so many languages, right? That's their impairment. Yeah. So she was teaching us how to treat para athletes, yeah, with respect. Yeah. So one of the things that she said that, when don't assume that a para athlete needs your assistance or help. Yeah, right. We talked just now about disability, right? Right. So they may be quite able within their impairment, right? So if they don't ask for help, you do not need to offer. She says, you may not need to offer help. If they want help, they will ask you. All right, they will ask you, right? And so one of the things, don't assume that para athletes need your assistance or help. They are quite enabled within themselves, right? Number one. So don't assume. Number two, she taught us that wheelchair, yeah, the wheelchair is an extension of the person's body. So do not touch the wheelchair. Yeah. Don't touch the wheelchair unless you have their permission. Just like you don't usually just touch someone's shoulder, right? Not typically, right? You stand a distance because you don't know where their body, where's their boundary, where's their personal boundary. So the wheelchair is part of their body, so do not touch it. She tells things like that to us. And then that was an education she gave to the doping control officers in terms of etiquette. And then what's special about doping control for our para athletes is because they may have visual impairment, and some of them have auditory, they have auditory hearing, they have hearing impairment as well. So they may need some assistance. Typically, they would have their own chaperone or own assistant to help them in a doping control setting where we collect urine or blood samples. And so that may not typically be for non-para games, because in a what we call Olympic games or non-para games, they may need a chaperone only for, say, translation or interpretation, interpreting language. But for in the para games, you have these special things that you might have to look after. On top of that, some para athletes may come with other issues because they have comorbidity. So they may be on a catheter, they may urinary catheter, right? And so they may need to catheterize themselves in order to produce a urine sample, right? Either a catheter that's already indwelling, or they've got to put in a fresh catheter, right? So these are some special things that we take note of that's peculiar to them. Okay.
Wow, thank you for sharing on that. And it's true, the etiquette that learning about etiquette when we are interacting with friends who have different abilities is something that has scared a lot of us when it's our first, if it's our first time interacting with some of our friends with who are differently abled. I remember that we had a colleague who doesn't have a hand, and I remember that when he reached out to shake hands with one of my other colleagues was so terrified. What do I do? How do I not? I think the intention is always, we don't want to offend people, and the intention is always, hopefully, or at least in our cases, the intention was good, but then, how do you respond without how do you respond appropriately? And I guess that brings into the question, I guess we could always ask,
Yes. Because the person put the arm out, the arm that was shortened, and then what we would normally do is just hold the stump and shake the hand. Right?
Exactly.
But sometimes if it faces you, you're not sure. Sometimes people even go backwards. They actually retreat. Because they there's no hand,
Yeah. Exactly. So it's a different it's as you said, it's really expanding the mind, expanding our experience, and also, I guess, learning about just being willing to ask for help and willing to ask.
How do I shake your hand? You could even ask them just, how do I shake your hand? There, you can just hold my stump and shake. Because they've dealt with what they've gone through a lot. And they've already dealt with what they've dealt with. So if they lift their arm, or you just shake and hold the stump. Just to share, a couple of weeks ago, one of my friends who's a quad amputee. That means he has both his arms and his legs amputated, right? Because he developed illness he developed gangrene after eating raw fish. So he's one of our wheelchair athletes. I'm not sure whether he's tuned in, right? He's one of our most prominent wheelchair athletes. His name is Mr. Tan Wee Boon. And I invited Wee Boon to visit an old friend of mine whose mother was participating in a program that we're doing online to exercise. And she had a little son, her little young grandson was like maybe 5 or 6 years old. And so when he saw Wee Boon come in to the house, and Wee Boon didn't have his arms, but he was wearing his prosthetic legs. And when Wee Boon brought his arm up, his stump, to shake his hand, he retreated, exactly like how you described. He retreated and he pointed. He shook his hand. And it's like, there's an alien that came to my house, with 2 prosthetic legs. And but at the end of the hour, when we left the house to say goodbye, he came to the door, this little boy, the 6-year-old boy, he came and he reached out. Yeah, he wasn't so frightened, but he took an hour to collect himself. Yeah, observing. Yeah, he took an hour to collect
Yeah.
himself. Yeah, he had to sort it out himself within himself. Yeah, but he came to the
Yeah.
door to say goodbye.
Oh, wow.
That's
Thank you for
amazing.
sharing that. Yeah. I think that's what we all need. I think we all need, first of all, to be willing to. Oh, there's so much to say on this topic. We need to. It's the whole point in inclusion and being willing to learn and being willing to be open and then taking the time to process because it's not necessarily something we're used to. So
No, yeah, no, yeah.
yeah.
And it's okay. And really, I think, and because our athletes, I told you that they had such a great sense, they have such a great sense of humor, right? I'll tell you a story of my own. Some years ago, when we had the 2015 Paralympic Para Games here in Singapore, and our athletes have spinal cord injuries, right? And they have no sense, and some of their spinal cord injuries end up with them not having any sensation on their skin, right? So they can develop sores, pressure sores, and pressure wounds, and the skin breaks down. So they have no feeling, right? But they can still have skin conditions, like eczema or rashes. So I remember one day we were all in the medical center in the hotel at Marina Bay Sands, and then one of them wheels himself in on the wheel. He has a spinal cord injury, and I remember he came up. He said, "Dr. Teoh, my skin below my knee is very red, and I have rashes." And he said, "I have rashes. You see, it's so red. Yeah, have you got something to put on it?" And then I said, just without thinking, I said, "Oh, is it itchy?" He said, "I don't know, Dr. Teoh. I can't feel." I can't feel, Dr. Teoh. I don't know whether it's itchy or not, but it's red. And there were like 5 or 6 of us in that room, and we all burst out laughing, including him. They have such a great sense of humor. Yeah. I said, "Yeah, of course you can't feel. Oh, what a dodo I am." Of course you can't feel. But that's the automatic question the doctor would ask. And they had just such a great sense of humor that we just laughed about it. And I said, "You can put this cream. Uh, yeah. So it's very important to be able to laugh. Yeah, laugh. I mean, we're not laughing at, just laughing at him or at, you're just laughing at the situation.
Right.
I
Yes.
learned also that Paralympic athletes are very hardly ever late. They're always early and waiting for you, because it takes longer to get everywhere and anywhere because you're a para athlete. So I don't think I remember waiting for a para athlete. I'm waiting for a para athlete. They were always waiting for you, waiting, always ready to go. Yeah, early than late. I can't quite say that for the other athletes though, because they always think they can make it on time and they can run. And make it not all. I mean, the odd one might be late, right? Yeah, but I've not had a para athlete who's late for the bus.
Oh, wow. Now, I guess on that point, so I have 2 more questions. Let me just be very cognizant of the time. And also, I know that there are questions already from the floor. So I guess the one question for me is, maybe this is very, very obvious, but what would you say are the main differences between the preparations of a team and yourself as a doctor for a parasport event versus the non-parasport event? And I think probably more importantly, what are the similarities, maybe in terms of time frame or briefings, or could you give us some insights into that?
Oh, well, I think preparation, where we still need to do all the doctorly medical things. Yeah. So making sure their medical files are proper, their medical conditions pre-existing are treated, their injuries and illnesses, we need to take care of them before they depart, right? On an ongoing basis, and certainly before they depart, and maintain it while they're there. Getting a good team of medical personnel who are equipped to take care of them, have experience to take care of them, and then pre-departure briefings, supplies, and then something called therapeutic use exemption, which is for para athletes themselves, because they have comorbidities, they tend to be on various medications. And some of these medications may actually appear on what is called the WADA's prohibited list. Yeah, so we need to check against that and apply for the necessary what we call therapeutic use exemption, so that they are allowed to take the medication for legitimate reasons and to compete. Otherwise, they might be, inadvertent tested positive, and they go and they need to undergo unnecessary duress and stress, right? Yeah, and risk for getting their medal removed. What's different maybe logistically, we've described that already. Yeah, so logistically the preparation is a lot. They have their equipment, they have their mobility aids, they have their sometimes visual aids, hearing aids, whatever these aids are, yeah, to enable them, right? Yeah, to enable them. So we need to make sure that's all in place for them. And then of course different also because we have their caregivers to look after. Yeah, they're caregivers and chaperones. Yeah, so they have quite a big team following them. Yeah, yeah. So all that too. So that's how it's different from regular non-para preparation.
Mm-hmm. I'm just suddenly thinking about devices working in Pyeongchang because in Pyeongchang we had, not for the Paralympic Games, for at least for the Olympic Games, just before we began, there was this really, really cold snap. And it was so cold that normal things were not necessarily working the way we wanted to. And so when thinking about medical devices and batteries and metal against skin and all the concerns that we have with any additional devices around cold weather, for example, or maybe not even just cold weather, but different weather, that must be a lot of thinking and a lot of preparation work around that as well.
Yes. Because Summer Olympics and Winter Olympics have different preparation. Yeah. Because they get cold. Yeah, because some of our athletes have certain conditions where they might get what we call hypothermic or hyperthermic, which is they get their body regulation of their temperature is not fine as ours. Yeah, so they can get very cold or they can overheat. Yeah, so this is one of the things, and this is especially for people who have spinal cord injury, for example, right? Yeah.
Right.
So when they finish coming in from, say, the cross country race, right? When they come in, you can see them. Did you see them, Xuanming? Because you were at the Winter Games, right? They will have these silver, like silver blankets.
Blankets, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. Did you see that? Yeah, I mean, I think you're an expert in wilderness medicine, so you must be familiar with all this in the part of the world that you live now, very cold. So I think you'd be familiar with that more than me.
By no means an expert. I hope to keep learning, and it's always fascinating to see the different. I mean, just very recently, in fact, there has been some updates even on the way we treat hypothermia and so forth. So it's all very interesting to me.
Okay.
Great. Then this one, I left this a little late. I should have asked this much earlier. But I know that you translated a lot of your learnings and your experiences at the games into action outside of the games. So, for example, with Play Buddy, perhaps you could share with us a little bit about those different projects that you have outside of the whole games world, because that is sort of a fantastic world of its own, but then in life, in society, in our countries.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because at the beginning, when you asked me, what impacted me, right? So it was 2012. So from 2012, for a couple of years, those images and that experience just kind of burned in me, and I thought, oh no, how can we do something to share with people, my community here, and I mean, at least immediately around me, that there's so much human potential, human potential that is untapped, right? Yeah, because I saw people with various impairments seemingly doing things that like blows my mind. So I came back and I started to inquire, right, and started to ask in various places. I went to visit various places where they looked after people with impairment, yeah, and impairments and or what they call with disabilities. Yeah. And I thought to myself, can we do something in the community? So one day I came across in my own sphere one of our physiotherapists, a good friend of mine, and she wanted to work with children with special needs. I said, really? She said, oh, but it's hard for me where I'm working now. I said, okay, if you can't do it in the hospital, why don't we do something outside together? Because I have this, I have this passion, I think, for para and parasport, and I think we don't do enough. People are living within some limits, so you can live an unlimited life, or a life that's different than what they think, or what they assume, or what they presume. So I said, okay. So I said, how about this? Why don't we start something in the community like a sports play group for children, for children, special children with special needs? He said, okay. So what I did was I went out and walked up to a little boy and his father. They were walking along the beach, and he was wearing what we call ankle foot orthosis, right? Which are made of plastic, because he tended to point his toe down. So he wore these to make sure his feet and his ankles were like 90 degrees. Yeah. So so I approached him and said, hey, hello, I'm Dr. Teoh, and I went to the Paralympic Games. Yeah, and I take care of para athletes. Would you like to play sports? And the father looked at me and said, you mean my son can play sports? And I thought, of course he can. Yeah, because I want him to play football, right? And at that time, Caden, his name is Caden, and Caden was about 6 or 7 years old. And I said, okay. So I went to make a home visit, and I visited him and his wife, and we had a long talk. And I said, okay, how about we start this group together? And so the physiotherapist, this young boy, his family, and ourselves, we started with him. And slowly we added child after child, one by one, very, very, very slowly. And over the last 4 years, we've grown to a group of maybe like 20 families. Yeah, slowly, 20 families. But when we have a Christmas party, including the volunteers, we may have about something like 90 people come to the Christmas party, right? That's how it's grown, from just that one boy and his father. We've grown and grown. And so what we do is every 4 to 6 weeks, we have a play program. Every Saturday morning we meet, and we play adapted sports together. Yeah, our own para sport. Okay, yeah, it may be table tennis, it may be bowling, right? And because I have so many wonderful friends who volunteer their time, we've got like the Singapore national bowling team who took us bowling with them. We've got next week the Singapore the rugby women's rugby team is going to help us during this COVID situation, because we cannot meet in the park, because we usually meet in the park. We're going to do outings in groups of 5 in Singapore, because we are not allowed to gather for more than 5. So we're going to meet one family, maybe one volunteer, and go out and play in the park with them. So we'll be in various parks because we cannot meet otherwise during COVID. So that's what has happened. Every 4 to 6 weeks, we change spots, and then we have outings, we have Christmas parties. And what's happened is we have now a community. It started off as just wanting to introduce sport to them, but it's become a community of families, and they all know each other. And because of COVID, we haven't been able to meet. Since in Singapore, we've got something, we had something called circuit breaker, right? And then we're in what we call phase 2, hoping to move to phase 3 of our coming out of what we call lockdown, circuit breaker. So we're in different phases. So because we cannot meet physically, we've met online. So we've gone on Zoom. So Play Buddy has gone on Zoom. And what I talked about community. So it's not just the kids and their families who are playing now together with us. We have somebody leading exercise every Saturday. Today, actually, we had one of my colleagues who's a medical doctor. Her name is Dr. Teoh, Thio. She and her 2 little sons who have no impairment, right? They were together with their mother demonstrating yoga on chair and on mat. And we've extended to include the elderly. So we've got 5 or 6 or 7 elderlies who have joined us from the age of 82 to 95 on Zoom, joining us to do exercise as well. Yeah. And how did that come about? It was because I figured during COVID, we're so afraid that our elderlies will will drop dead from COVID outside. We've confined all our elderlies all over the world. We've kept them in the house. We're so afraid they'll get COVID, right? Because they're at high risk, right? They usually have comorbidities. They are also elderly, so they're at great risk. So they're all confined at home. And so my uncle, who is 90, and my aunt, who was 91, when I went to visit them, when we were allowed to visit, they were at home and they miss walking downstairs. They used to walk at their apartment downstairs and they're not able to walk downstairs. So they were walking within their sitting room. And I thought, how can this be? So I just asked them, would you like to join us every Saturday morning? So they're faithfully joining us now on Saturday morning to exercise. So that's how Play Buddy has become, Zoom Buddy has become, including the young and the old, because the elderly are also in the wheelchair. They also use frame to walk. They wear hearing aids, and sometimes they have glaucoma or cataract, or they might have dementia. Some of our children have cognitive impairments. So actually, you're just at the one end of the spectrum of 0 plus 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, or you're 100 minus 9, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you may be 82 or 95, and that's how we've grown. Thank you for letting me share. It's one of my passions.
That's amazing. Genuinely. I know Neo is probably sick of me talking about this, but I always believe that community and connectedness is, well, it's not only me who believes it. We know this to be true through whether studies or research or reality, that connectedness is fundamental to our resilience and our ability to overcome challenges. And so building that community, fostering that connection is so imperative and so powerful. So really hearing about your passion in this, it really excites me as well. I'm thinking, there's so much more we can do. There's so, reaching out to each other, even in these times, that's something powerful.
Yeah. And we can't do it by ourselves. Yeah, I mean, we need a team of people who are like-minded, can see the vision, together, buy into the vision. So who are filled with the same, who have the same, what we call passion. Yeah. So if you have the same passion, and then you can see a need, you can see people with need, and then if you have a passion, and how are you going to translate that passion into a service, to serve that need of these people,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to find what drives you.
Yeah, I think that ties in perfectly to in one of your earlier, when you were invited to speak in another session, you mentioned your values of people, passion, service, and need. So that's something that I keep in mind now, and that I hope that our friends in the audience will also keep in mind and in heart. There are a few questions from the audience. One of them was from Charanjit Singh. I think the media should give equal coverage to disabled and able-bodied sports. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm in Singapore, and certainly over the last, I would say 5 years, we have had a lot of visibility for our para sport or para athletes, and I think this comes from the top, certainly in our government buys into the movement, right? And I think after we hosted the ASEAN 2015 Para Games, there was a great shift that I saw in the media for coverage of para sport, at least in Singapore. But I think each country has its own priority, so I don't think we can dictate or force people. I think people come to a place where they think that, hey, this is something we need and we want to do. So to each country his own. So for Singapore, I can only talk for my Singapore as a country, and that's what has happened. In fact, in every country where they hosted the Paris Games, there's a big shift after that, because the people are exposed and they are aware and they can see the possibilities. So certainly media is very, very powerful. In that part of the awareness.
Indeed. And I think it also brings to mind this question of, hang on, there are members of our community that we have not been connected with before. There are
Yes.
members of our community that we have not interacted with before.
Yes.
And why would we deny ourselves that pleasure and that joy of interacting with every aspect of our entire community and our entire society?
Yes.
So that's a powerful thing, a beautiful thing that media can help to sort of promote, and hopefully, even without media, that that each of us can also hold in mind.
Yes.
Another question here from Nora Sila. I apologize for butchering your name. Dr. Teoh, thank you. Great sharing. Many of us don't know the real stories, and just like you said, laugh at situations and understand their lives better. Through your experiences working with para-athletes, what is their life after their sporting careers? Does the association assist the athletes? This is interesting. I really want to know too.
Yeah, I think for both para and non-para athletes, I think the career after sport is very important because our identity is so wrought in, especially if they are especially if the athlete is what you call a full-time athlete, right? That means they eat, sleep, and dream their sport. Some of our athletes are not. I mean, in Singapore, we have athletes who still work, still go to school, and still train, and they juggle all that. Yeah. So they still have an identity and a life other than sport. Yeah. So if you have only your sport, yeah, as a full time, I think people need to think, because if they retire, they might have an identity crisis, right? Yeah. So in Singapore, some of our athletes, we have what we call like an athlete life or athlete services here, and so this is very important when they transition from athlete to working career. That means they retire. Yeah. Are we going to plan for them to be a coach? Because some of them, they start their own businesses in coaching, in other businesses. Um, um, so right at the beginning, when they're still competing, and you think they are coming, you expose them, you do partnerships. So over here, for example, we have some business partnerships with some of the big companies here, and some of them, they get salary. Yeah, they have a place to work, right, plus train, right, and the company is very proud of having them as on staff. Yeah. Because an athlete who is a para athlete has a certain mindset, yeah, that they bring to the office. Yeah. So their value, I think, is something different, that's something new and different from a person who is not an athlete or not a para athlete. So that's the value. So some of the companies can see this value they bring to the table. Yeah. I remember I went to one of the big MNCs. Yeah, they're a big sponsor of the Paralympic movement, right, internationally and locally, and they're so proud. They told us that the staff, their own staff, just by the fact that they have para athletes closely linked with them, their whole staff, their own life changed, and their staff started volunteering themselves in community even more so, because they're so inspired by the para athletes they are exposed to. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not as for whether the association assists them, I think that's very individual. Yeah, from association to association. Certainly, as a nation in Singapore, this is an important point. So as a nation, we look at this. Yeah, yeah. For example, in Singapore, it's Sport SG. Yeah, Sport SG has
Yes.
a big role in this. Yeah.
Yeah, this is true. We're also seeing from our interactions with different countries that different countries do things very, very differently.
Yes.
And we know that some countries will basically do, as you said, support their athletes throughout their career and sort of
Yes.
include opportunities for them to be studying at the same time as being an athlete, or to
Yes.
be having work opportunities at the same time as being an athlete. And that's not
Yes.
always the case, but it's definitely a healthy way to create that continuity after that career ends.
Yes.
So yeah, wow. This looks as if I think that was the last question I have from the floor, but In that case, I have something to ask, actually.
Yes. Okay.
You, during one of our earlier conversations,
Yes.
there was a quote from you. I think you mentioned optimize health to maximize potential. That
Okay.
was something that really resonated with me.
Okay.
Would you like to say anything about that? Or in fact, instead of putting you on the spot for that particular
Okay. All
quotation,
right.
is there anything that you would like to highlight or share with us, that you really want to point out, or any other things that you wish to bring up or
No,
share?
I think, well, maybe just, well, we can talk just a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that can be my parting shot, lah. Optimizing health to maximize potential. Yeah. Because I'm a medical doctor, and we see illness, disease, uh, injury, right? And sometimes what we do is, sometimes some of us look, as a healthcare person, we look at them and we see them for what they are in our room, no? Reality, what's called reality. So we see reality: illness, amputation, spinal cord injury, neurological illness, stroke. So we look at it and see it for what it is. But I think, when people come to see us as a healthcare professional or a coach or whichever, whoever you are, a caregiver or a family member, while you know this as a fact, like staring at you, our role, especially as a healthcare person, right, is our role is to give people hope, to see them for what they could be. While you know what people are, it's very important for us to see and believe for what they could possibly be. That means when you're taking them from illness or injury, not just back to health, or as back to their, if you can give them their previous state of health, all well and good. Sometimes they cannot get their previous state of health because, for example, if they've lost their arm, they've lost their arm. Of course, you can give them a bionic arm, right? You can give them a prosthetic arm, but they have lost their arm. That's a fact. It will never be back where it was. But so that's what it is, seeing them for what they are. But what could they possibly be, right? So in that journey, when we are walking along with them, we want to show them what the possibility could be. Yeah. So we must always hope for the best for them, believe for them. When they cannot sometimes believe them for themselves, we must believe first. We must hope. Because sometimes when they have this impairment, for example, suddenly you amputated your arm, right? They have no hope. They are depressed. They say, what is my life going to be? Yeah, right. So you need to believe. And it may be somebody like, for example, my friend just now, the quadruple amputee. He's got no arms and no legs. So if Shen Ming, you and I can tell the amputee with one arm, hey, don't worry, you can have a good life. You can this and that. But if Wee Boon comes to them and said, brother, you can have your life, you can come and play with us, And if you look at Wee Boon with no arms and no legs, looking at you with one arm, and you're thinking, I think if he can make it, so can I. There's like a picture says 1,000 words, right? And a physical person in front of you. Yeah. So we must always believe for them, even when they cannot believe in themselves. Yeah. So that's what I mean by, you want to optimize their health as best as they can, so that truly they can maximize their potential. And sometimes their life can be even different and different than what they ever had before. Like Wee Boon, if he didn't lose his arms and legs, he would never know, for example, what is wheelchair rugby. I would not be speaking about him today. Right? Yeah. And he's a well-known person in the whole of Singapore, Before his amputation, he was who he was. He's a wonderful man. Yeah. Wonderful person. Married with 2 children. Yeah. And he had to contend with many things before he arrived where he is today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Genuinely, thank you. I think many people forget that being in a medical profession, that a part of the role of a medical professional is also education, is also
Yes.
more than just treating
Yes.
any problems or ailments that come into the clinic. So I'm really grateful to you for taking time to share with us, for even driving to the office just so that you have the solid connection and everything. Really, really thankful. Thankful to you and for all your sharings, and also for inspiring us and for giving us hope, because this is, I think, for a lot of us, a hope that we didn't even know that we could have. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and from all of the Ignites family, and from our audience as well. I really, really appreciate you, and all that you have done and all that you continue to do.
Right.
With all of this knowledge and all of this sharing that Dr. Teoh has given to us, I hope that all of us feel empowered to act, to take all of these insights into consideration in all that we do, to remember people, to act upon our passions, to serve and to support, and to basically nurture hope. So thank you again for taking the time to speak with us. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today, for engaging with us in the audience. I hope that we can all meet again on our next conversations, when we continue to discuss accessibility, inspiration, and empowerment. And I hope for everyone that hope will continue to permeate and punctuate all of your days. Keep calm, wash your hands. See you all very soon.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.